one constant feeling reigns over the 130-plus year history of NC State Wolfpack football. Hope. And when there's hope, well, Pack fans can always relate. Pack family, time for a true look at your team. Expert analysis, special guests, and a Carter-Finley-sized bag full of X's and O's. Let's get hooked up for Pack Therapy. Here are your hosts, Tim Donnelly and Wolfpack great Mike Lennon.
Welcome into another season of the Pack Therapy podcast. I'm Tim Donnelly, and as always, when it comes to football here on Pack Therapy, we're joined by Mike Lennon, NC State legend. What's going on, Mike?
It's great to be back, Tim. I'm excited to do this with you this year, and hopefully we have a great season of Wolfpack football in front of us where we're talking more about the positives than the negatives.
We're gonna have to talk about it all. It's college football season. There's gonna be ups and downs, and you know, last season you look at it, there's kind of a divide, right? Maybe the defense very, very up, the offense at times ups and downs. So let's start this season of Pack Therapy focusing on the offense, right? There's Brennan Armstrong is going to be a big point of conversation this year. Robert Anae is going to be a big point of conversation this year, and the guys around them that support them and try to make that offense work are going to have their part as well. So let's start by looking back, I guess. I just brought it up. Bottom half of the ACC in most offensive stats, points, yards, rushing yards, passing yards. From your recollection, and I know you were doing this pod, I know you were at a bunch of the games watching kind of what happened, right, when that offense didn't get to reach its lofty goals.
Yeah, I think it all started with the quarterback position. Devin Leary comes in with very high expectations and honestly wasn't quite living up to them, and then he had an injury. And then that's when the carousel of quarterbacks started happening. It was Jack Chambers, then it was MJ Morris, then it was Ben Finley. I mean, we saw them all, and to their credit, MJ Morris did a great job stepping in and looked like at the time we thought it was going to turn to him this year. Ben Finley comes in against Carolina, has a great victory, and then there's a quarterback up in Charlottesville at this time. It's just crazy, this new era of college football, what it is. And now incepts Brennan Armstrong, who transfers here for his 6th year of college football. And anytime you bring in a quarterback in his 6th year, he's going to be the guy. And I know NC State fans are excited about MJ Morris, but I really think this could be the best thing that happens for him. And here we are, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. It's a brand new season. So a lot to talk about.
I was at ACC kickoff in Charlotte, and we kind of did the imagine this time last year, where Devin Leary kind of was Drake May, right? He was the guy walking around about to be the ACC Player of the Year preseason, and all the NFL draft love, and always got the NFL arm and all these sorts of things. Brennan Armstrong was also there. He was walking around with UVA, coming off of one of the best statistical seasons that we've seen from especially a UVA quarterback, but across the ACC, almost 4,500 yards. And to see where all of that has flipped, and now Brennan's walking around ACC kickoff for State, and Devin Leary is in Kentucky saying whatever he's saying. It's really a tale of very, very different situations for NC State. Those are very, very dramatic changes. From your perspective, you've been a part of some pretty dramatic changes when it comes to quarterbacking and offenses in college sports and at State specifically. What does that do for a team when you're shaking up that kind of main component and everybody's looking towards a different guy?
I just think it's the new era of what it's going to be from here on out. There's going to be new faces, new names every year that us NC State fans are going to have to get to know. I mean, you look at the basketball team, and that is a new team last year, but you see the dividends that it pays when you find some good players in it. And Brennan Armstrong, going back 2 years ago, was an unbelievable player, was the talk of the ACC at this point last year. Mm-hmm. And now he's kind of the forgotten name. He transfers to a new program, and point blank, he needs to play better than he did last year. So I'm excited for him. They obviously feel very good about him. The fact that they were kind of willing to let Devin Leary walk in a way, I don't think there was a ton of conversation. I think there comes to a point where, for his sake, for NC State's sake, it just kind of made sense to move on in different directions. And I know there's no ill will feelings there, but when you have a player as good as Devin Leary and you don't really – it didn't feel like there was much of a fight to get him back, I think that shows that they felt good about MJ Morris and they felt good about getting a transfer like Brennan Armstrong. And I know right when they hired Robert and I last December, which is interesting to me as well, that they don't even wait till the end of the bowl season. I'm sure Robert and I was in Dave Doran's ear saying, hey, I think if we go get Brennan Armstrong, we'll have a chance.
And you bring up it's just kind of the way of college sports with the transfers and everything. I do think it's interesting. You almost have to re-recruit players constantly. And Dave Doran has been, from my observations, very diligent in saying, we're excited about Brennan Armstrong. MJ Morris is the future of the program. We're excited about Brennan Armstrong. MJ Morris is the future of the program because you don't want somebody to go on your field like Morris did last year, show that he has the talent almost as an audition for everyone else in college sports, and not feel the love where he is, to keep his feet where to be where his feet are, or whatever the college the coach is saying is.
I thought this spring, I know MJ was around in the spring, but I had a feeling that he was probably going to leave just because with NIL, he's from Atlanta. There's a lot of SEC programs that can offer a lot of money. And to get him back is great for the future of this program. And he may not realize it now because you want that instant gratification. But this is going to be the best thing for his career. He burned his red shirt last year. Mm-hmm. Now he gets to sit back for a year, learn from Brennan Armstrong, see how he runs his Robert and I offense, and then it'll be his team for 3 years. And from an NFL perspective, for NC State, all of it, this is going to be the best thing that happens to MJ Morris. And I'm glad he didn't choose that instant gratification of going to another school. He's going to be here at NC State and hopefully keeps, our history of good quarterback play going between, what we had the past few years with Devin, what hopefully Brennan brings this year, what MJ will bring for the years to come.
QBU? Is that what you were throwing
QBU, I know. I see these ESPN articles come out. We don't even get mentioned anymore. It's ridiculous.
It's David Hale, who covers college football on the ACC for ESPN. He's made it like a yearly thing to list his top 10 QBUs, and the first paragraph is always, and this is where the NC State fans are going to complain that NC State wasn't mentioned, but he explains all the criteria and everything. I mean, a big part, and as well as I do, we both played college quarterback, that the supporting cast matters almost as much as the player coming in, right? For Brennan Armstrong to get back to 2021 Brennan Armstrong, and for all of the hype and the potential to be lived up to, he's going to need, number one, offensive line, who actually did a pretty good job protecting the quarterback last year. Maybe a little bit more you'd like to see out of the running game, but also the receivers and the pass catchers. Thayer Thomas feels like he was on campus for a very, very long time. He's now trying to make his way in the NFL. Devin Carter, you talk about the transfer portal, it's just going to happen. Leading returning receiver, 342 yards. Not what you're hoping for as a quarterback coming into a situation. Any concern, and that's Lesane, by the way. Any concern for the lack of experience out there?
Definitely is concern. I feel confident in this team, and I think with Brennan Armstrong, with really Dave Doran, Tony Gibson, Robert, and I feel confident that they're going to be true competitors in the ACC. But if they want to get into that final stretch where they're fighting for an ACC championship at the end of the year when we're in late November, one of these receivers is going to have to step up and become the guy. Right now, they have a bunch of quality ACC players, but there's going to have to be one of these guys. You mentioned Keon Lesane. Is it Porter Rooks? Is it Trent Penix, the tight end? One of these guys is going to have to step up and become that true go-to receiver that they've had in years past in Emeka Emezi and Thayer Thomas and Devin Carter. When it's 3rd and 5 and the game is on the line, everyone in the stadium knows the ball is going to this guy. He's going to make the play one-on-one. And right now, none of these guys have shown to be that one.
Is it that, or because I went back and watched and I covered a lot of Brennan Armstrong at UVA, and obviously with Robert and I there in 2021, they had 4 or 5 guys that were all legitimate options, right? And kind of the secret sauce there was Brennan Armstrong was distributing the ball, and it was whoever's open, and it wasn't exactly hey, even if this guy's covered on 3rd and long, I'm going to Dontavian Wicks or whoever was there. Could it be that State has, even if it's Jordan Houston, split out a little bit more often, if it is Trent Penix split out a little more often, and then the guys you mentioned, the Porter Rooks, the Lesanes, maybe even a Concepcion, could they get it done with 4 guys kind of all being there, or do you need that number one?
You can get it done by committee, and I think you bring up a great point. Is I think in this Robert Anae offense, we're going to see a lot more Jordan Houston. What Robert Anae is great at is he's great at finding the mismatch, and that's what Jordan Houston can be. It can be Jordan Houston flexed out what they did with Sean Tucker last year, who I actually think Jordan Houston's a better pass catcher than what Sean Tucker was at Syracuse. They joked about it on Will Compton busting with the boys, but you get that milk check. You see a linebacker out there on Jordan Houston, that's a win. And we're going to attack those guys. And if you put Trent Penix and Jordan Houston out there together, if you get man coverage, one of them has to have a linebacker on him. Are you going to put a safety or a linebacker on those two guys? And I think that's where Robert Anae's creativity of his offense, you can exploit these mismatches. So to answer your original question, yes, it can be done by committee to have a good year, but to be a great year, to be in that ACC championship, one of these guys is going to have to become a true number one receiver.
You bring up Trent Penix. He's an interesting one for me because, like the statistical oddities or whatever, like it's just kind of a fun fact. He comes into this year, he's had 5 years in college already, which is already a little unusual. He essentially had a full college career as a running back, listed as a running back, and then transitioned over to now a kind of a featured member as a tight end. But he has 39 catches and 39 carries in his career. Then you have someone like Jordan Houston, who you bring up, brings a lot of pass catching, but he's listed as a running back. Is this positionless football? Like, is it NBA where you don't have bigs and guards anymore? You have everyone who's 6'9" and can do it all.
That's what Trent Penix brings. The problem is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. So if he can stay healthy, he can be that guy. Everyone wants to talk about what Robert and I did with Oronde Gadsden last year at Syracuse, where he was kind of this hybrid tight end receiver, and I think Trent Penix can be that guy. But what I think he does best, to your point about everyone's kind of playing the position, I remember last year when NC State played against Syracuse, Oronde Gadsden was lined up in the backfield and ran up the rail for a wide open touchdown. And it's just those little kind of confusing elements that Robert and I brings to the system where they can line up, Jordan Houston can line up a receiver. He can line up in the slot. They could bring Trent Penix back to running back. They can bring whoever, Keon Lassane. I mean, he moves guys around and causes confusion for the defense. And I know that's one thing that Dave Doran talked about when he brought in Robert and I was he was a hard game plan. He knows Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator, makes it hard on opposing offenses. He wanted that same thing for when defenses turn on the film of NC State's offense. He wanted to say, man, this is going to be a tough week. We got a lot to game plan for this week. And that's what Robert and I is going to bring. So, yeah, they can line up wherever, and I think that's what we're going to see a lot of this year. You bring up a funny point because in the era of, and I'm looking it up here, in the era of transfer portal, whenever you see a player jump teams, I almost always want to go check and see, hey, what did that player do against the team that they played 2 years ago and he had his career year there. So it's like if Robert and I had a great game plan against State in the past, they're like, oh, we got to get that guy on our team, right? If we see, I just brought up MJ Morris's career game log. If we see him jump to Virginia Tech or Wake Forest one year, it's like, oh yeah, well he threw for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions against both of them. It's a pretty good audition. You hope that doesn't happen, but it is, if Tony has a really tough time with Robert and I's offense, it makes sense that he's like, I give him my cosign. He should come over. I want to talk about Anae's offense though, because you bring it up a little bit. He's a tough game plan. And one of the most obvious things that I'm asked, and I'm sure you're asked going into this season, is what does Anae do to unlock Brennan Armstrong? There's, I don't know if you read the QB Confidential on ESPN.com, but it's all the anonymous coaches. They go and they survey coordinators and ACC coaches from all over, and they ask them to talk about the quarterbacks. And an anonymous ACC defensive coordinator said Brennan Armstrong, when he was with Anae, looked like a first-round pick. He's not going to be a first-round pick because it's very obvious that it's a system-specific thing because he didn't translate. But when he's with Anae, he looked like a first-round pick. So what does Anae do? And my reaction is, and I've kind of crafted this over the offseason, is Robert Anae was Brennan Armstrong's offensive coordinator at UVA. He was also Bryce Perkins' offensive coordinator at UVA when Bryce Perkins was running for almost 2,000 yards and a whole bunch of touchdowns over his 2 years as a starter at UVA. So is Anae
Does he unlock Brennan Armstrong, or does he just build it around whatever his roster has and he finds success with it?
He builds it around whatever he has. I remember meeting with him in the spring, and he was still, a little unsure of exactly what the offense was going to look like because he's trying to figure out how he can tailor around his current playmakers. And he's going to find ways to get those guys the ball and create the mismatch. So the biggest thing that I feel like he does is it's actually a pretty simple offense. They run a lot of the same concepts over and over again. They just find different ways to get it. And what John Gruden, when I was with him, he used to say, it's the illusion of sophistication. It's just window dressing. We're going to draw this up a little bit different. We're going to run the same plays every week, but we're going to make
different formations and motions
motion
and everything.
shifts. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're lining up in the exact same spot, and our guys know it's this basic play. But to the defense, it looks completely different. And Robert Anae does a great job using formations, using stack formations where you have two receivers lined up, which makes the defense communicate. They use bunch formations, which, again, there's all this constant communication with the defense, and all it takes is one guy not getting the communication, and you might have someone wide open. And I think, especially at the college level, they're only allowed, 20 hours a week? There's a lot less time to game plan. You're dealing with 18 and 22-year-old kids. You're not dealing with NFL guys that are there all day. So the communication aspect is way more important, and it's way more difficult on these guys. So if he forces these defenses that might not be, up to speed with it, and one little communication error, and you get a wide open guy.
It also puts an emphasis on the intelligence of your offense, though, because if you're, I know it's the illusion of complexity, and it's simple, but with all those motions and shifts, and Trent Penix has to know how to play out wide, right? It's not just a tight end and 4 yards off the tackle or whatever the formation is. So it's going to be growing pains, I guess, is my question early on with a new offense and so many new faces in it.
That's fair. That as complicated as it is on the defense, if you're an offense and you aren't getting lined up correctly, there's going to be issues. Yeah. But I feel like all the time they get in walkthroughs in training camp to work on these motions, these shifts, these formations, yes, there could be growing pains, but you would hope with, even though a lot of these guys haven't played a ton, they are experienced, and they should be able to pick up on these little nuances because at the end of the day, like I said, it's the same play. It's just we're getting there in a different way.
You brought up Sean Tucker at Syracuse, right? One of the hardest things to do for Anae is to look back at his career and try to – because, usually if an offensive coordinator moves with Nathaniel Hackett, to use an NFL example, going to the Jets, it's very easy to say, Garrett Wilson is going to play the Devontae Adams role, right? And you're just kind of filling in. It's got Aaron Rodgers, and it just kind of makes sense. You look at someone like Sean Tucker, who was so effective for Syracuse, and we talked with Garrett Schrader, who he was the quarterback up there at Syracuse. He had a career year and was very complimentary of Robert Anae and was happy that they were getting somebody from that same coaching tree to take over. Michael Allen of the running backs probably has the physical makeup that looks more like Sean Tucker. Is that kind of a slide in there where maybe Houston can do some of the fun stuff and the versatile stuff, but then Allen is maybe the more traditional running back in this offense?
Yeah, I already mentioned I think Jordan Houston is going to have a big year, but I think it's going to be both, from the backfield, split out wide, kind of a jack-of-all-trades guy where they're going to need to establish this run game more because that was clearly lacking in the past. And to be a great football team, you got to be able to establish a run. And when you have a defensive-minded head coach, they want to establish the run. But what I will say is Brennan Armstrong can run the ball as well. So that is another element we are going to see this year that we haven't necessarily seen in the past, especially with Devin Leary. MJ Morris brought some of that. We saw it with Jack Chambers. But Brennan is a true dual-threat, physical, tough runner that I know Dave Doran has said he hasn't had a guy like this in the past. I mean, Jacoby Brissett may be the closest thing, but I think Brennan even has more of a mentality to run with the football than a quarterback we've seen here in over a decade.
Doran said 20 miles per hour on the GPS in spring. I don't even know what that looks like as far as a quarterback or what that would feel like. But again, going back to Anae, and I've talked about this on our afternoon show. The 2 years that Brennan Armstrong was really the featured starter at UVA with Anae, the running actually went significantly down from year one to year two. He 550 rushing yards in the first year as a starter, 250 the second year. He was still a goal line option and picked up some touchdowns. But, with Anae crafting his offense, that's what everybody keeps telling me around the talent, that kind of tells me maybe they won't use Brennan Armstrong as much as a runner, because as that offense more molded to him and his skill set, they actually ran the ball less.
Well, I think if you're throwing the ball well, you'd probably
prefer
prefer
4,500 yards.
Yeah, when you're having the kind of year he had, there's no need to run the ball. And I think you'd much rather get those yards to the air and have your receivers taking the hits than your starting quarterback. So if all's going well and these receivers step up like we hope they will, then I think that they're going to favor the passing attack and, like you said, use it more in the goal line. But look, if this run game's not working, if they can't hand the ball off and have the success that they had with Sean Tucker at Syracuse, or vastly improved from last year, then they're going to have to throw Brennan in there, and then you risk injury, but you feel confident with MJ as the backup. But I think if Dave Doran has his way, they're not going to rely on Brennan Armstrong running the ball. They're going to use him in goal line situations. They're going to use it when he scrambles and has to get out of a mess, but not a ton of design quarterback runs unless they're just not establishing the run.
All right, we have a 10-year NFL veteran quarterback here, so I'm going to quarterback nerd out on some Armstrong questions here for a second. First one, Brennan Armstrong's a lefty. We can all agree the ball spins the wrong way, and that's going to take a while to get used to, right?
I would hope they have it figured out by now, but without a doubt, every receiver I talk to, as always said, it's difficult catching a lefty pass.
And it's weird for us to watch. It's like you're watching it in the mirror, but I guess we'll all have to get used to it this year for a year. I looked it up. You hold the record for passing attempts in a season at State with 564. That was over 13 games. Brennan Armstrong, the last time he was with Robert Anae, threw it 500 times, but in just 11 games.
That's a quarterback's dream. That's what I loved about my offense when I was here, is we were running this pro-style offense, not this spread offense, but we threw it, I don't know what that comes to, 40 times a game?
The math? Yeah, something like that, something crazy. But is your record in danger? Like if Armstrong and Anae link up and pick up where they left off, they're flirting with it if he plays 13 games.
I think if they have it their way, they're not going to throw it quite that much. And honestly, what I just thought of is I know now there's going to be a running clock after first downs. So there actually might, you're taking a couple plays away a game, and that might be the difference. But hey, I'm all for it. I love watching them throw it around, and he can do it. So as a fan, I would love to see him break that record.
And this is, kind of goes back to what the anonymous defensive coordinator said. Is there a way he can show he's an NFL guy this year, Brennan Armstrong? Because he's going to have that label, right? That system quarterback label. If he bounces back this year, the credit's going to go to Anae, probably more so even than Armstrong.
No, he can definitely show that he's an NFL quarterback. When you turn on the tape from last year, that Virginia offense was a mess. I'll start with Brennan. Brennan did not play well, especially when you look what he's capable of doing. The receivers, they have guys that are in the NFL right now. They dropped so many balls. The offensive line was a mess. The system, it was a new system. It just wasn't working. So I think, although he might get dinged for that, I think they can look past it and say, that was just a mess. Let's give him a slight pass for that. And if he plays like he did 2 years ago this year, he'll be in the NFL next year.
Quickly on the offensive line. We talked about them. They actually did a pretty good job protecting the quarterback last year, right? Whoever was the quarterback, which is not ezy for an offensive line, right? When even it's something as simple as 4 different cadences throughout the year can kind of mess with your get off and all that. But and we've talked about that running game and kickstarting it. They did bring in the transfer Dawson to compete at guard. Anything obvious stand out about what they need to change or improve on when you look at the guys up front?
I feel good about this offensive line, really. I think Dylan McMahon, starting him at the center, he's a guy that could have gone to the NFL last year and chose to come back. And he's a guy that's going to be drafted. I don't know how early, but he's going to be drafted, I would guess, in the mid-rounds next year. He could be what Garrett Bradbury was here in the past. He's extremely athletic. He's a freak in the weight room. And then on the left tackle, they got Anthony Belton, who is a giant. I saw him this spring, and I didn't realize how big he is. And I know they're excited about him. He's got great size. He's a run blocker. Just needs to be a little bit more consistent with his pass protection this year. Then the right tackle, Tim McKay, a guy that's been around for a while. I know they feel really good about him. So it's going to be about those two guards. But this offensive line, I do feel good about their pass protection. Let's see if they can get the run game going a little bit more than what we saw last year.
And last thing here before we wrap up this premier debut episode for the season of Pack Therapy. Big news involving Carter-Finley yesterday. There's going to be some entertainment districts. The Centennial Authority and the Canes are going to be around for another 20 years on the lease extension. We've been promised that the tailgating is still going to remain largely intact, right? Of the 14,000 spots or whatever, 12,000 of them will be there, and all of the important lots are going to be taken care of. As a player, you've gotten to experience some of the tailgating since it's all wrapped up, or since your career here wrapped up. What are you looking for? What do you want out of that entertainment district?
I'm personally excited about it. I know some NC State fans are, up in arms about the tailgating situation, which I do understand. But you take away, 2,000 spots, I feel like we still have a better tailgate scene with more spots than any ACC school I can think of. I mean, even NFL stadiums, there's not much better tailgate setup than what Carter-Finley, the fairgrounds, has right now. So I'm excited about this entertainment district to be able to go to the bar, grab a drink, whether there's live music, whether there's a sports book, whether there's going to be some entertainment aspect to it that I'm sure Tom Dundon's mind is going all over the place of what he can do with this. I still think the tailgate scene is going to be great. It's as good as any school there is. The fans love it, and I think it's a win. I mean, there's roughly 7 home games a year. There's a spring game. I mean, for the 365 days a year compared to the 7 days, I think it's a big win for Raleigh, for NC State, for this community. There's a 3,000 to 5,000 seat music venue that's going in. We talked with Phil Isley on the Drive, the afternoon show yesterday, who's part of the Centennial Authority board, and he said one of the things that opens up that music venue is if they want to have a concert same day as a football game, same day as a hockey game, they might be able to pull that off more often. If we're talking like night state game, afternoon concert, who are you throwing? Who's on the? Because you got to think vibe here, right? You need it to ramp up to the state game at night. What are you thinking? I mean, the first person that comes to mind is the Garner native, the NC State guy, Scotty McCreery. I mean,
of course.
I don't think we could go wrong with that. I think that'd be a great way to kick off. A game is go see a little Scotty perform a little, and then walk a few hundred yards over to your tailgate spot, and then head into the game. That's what you mentioned, is that there's more possibilities of things to do like that. When I played for the Jaguars, they actually have a small amphitheater attached to the stadium, which is attached to the indoor facility, and there would be events there pretty often that we would see them setting up for. So I think the opportunities are endless of what they can turn this into.
Mike, episode 1 in the books. Episode 2, we're talking defense next week. So, Aiden White and Peyton Wilson in the crew, you're on deck. This has been an episode of Pack Therapy with NC State legend Mike Glennon. I'm Tim Donnelly. We'll see you for the next one next week.